Okay, let's try this again. Hi, everybody. This is Claudia with Cabin Talk, and today we are here with Elana Freeland, and it is a real honor because Elana has been doing so much extensive research on geoengineering, on HARP, on 5G, which is what we're going to get into mostly today. And I'm honestly nervous to have you on because you are such a rock star. So I feel very humbled that you agreed to come onto my show. And I'm just honored to have you here. So thank you so much. And as an introduction, I also want to just pull this up real quick. Elana wrote this book, Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, as well as another book that is not out yet. And the title of that is Under an Ionized Sky. And that, Elana, will come out early next year, I believe.
Yes, from Feral House. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so we're excited to have that. This one is wonderful, and it's so there's so much information in there that I'm still plowing through it, actually. So thank you for writing those. They are magnificent tools for everybody. And so today we're going to talk about 5G and how it connects to also geoengineering, if that's something you could go into a little bit.
Oh, yes, this is a huge topic. And I wanted you to know, Claudia, that I am writing another book, the third in the series,
wow.
The Under an Ionized Sky, from Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. In that book, the second book, I take up the space fence, which is very important. This is the huge feature that has been built around us. It is the culmination of the old Star Wars defense system, the Strategic Defense Initiative. And it is within this dome, this Tesla dome, that we will be living. And it's very important to understand that by saying ionized sky, I'm talking about how the entire sky has been electrified. It is 24/7, like an antenna, like a battery. It's like in a way, a mini ionosphere. And this was the whole purpose of HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, was to zap the ionosphere, trigger more electrons ionized to come down, get a conduit going between the ionosphere and our troposphere, so that many military operations, wireless operations, could go forward. And that's what we're breathing now. And that's very important to know. We are breathing an electrified air. And we really feel it, I think, in summertime, when people have actually said to me, I feel like I'm in a microwave oven. I don't live in this. I don't live in the South. I live in the Pacific Northwest.
Right, right. And as you know, I live in Vermont. And this past spring, like late May, I was gardening for an hour and a half, and the heat was so intense. And I got so burned on my back that I had blisters after an hour and a half in the sun, which here the sun isn't even that strong. So I was in shock. I was like, how can that even be?
Yes, and we're led to believe this is about climate change and carbons, ozone layer thinning, and while all of those can be justified minimally, what is the elephant in the living room that is not being discussed is the military-industrial intelligence complex and their agendas. And they have several. And I point those out in the Chemtrails HARP book from the work of independent scientist Clifford Carnicom so long ago. Clifford he's a very good friend of mine. He was involved in the first research into what was falling from the sky from the jet trails being left over northern New Mexico. And he is the one who really discovered Morgellons, the genetically engineered entity that he has renamed the cross-domain bacteria. And when I was living in Santa Fe, Clifford and I would have breakfast every couple of weeks, and we would go deep into discussion about these matters. I had a biology background. That was my second major in college, but I never finished my degree. I was 3 hours short. I had things to do. It was the 60s. It was time to be on the move. And so now I feel very good about the third upcoming book that I'm writing, because it will be on synthetic biology. And believe it or not, your request for 5G plays a role in synthetic biology. And it's very crucial now that we understand what that role is. And I'm sure by the end of writing the book on the synthetic biology, I'll know a lot more about these, what are being called electro-optical relationships in technologies.
Right.
And the person who's bringing this forward the most right now is the young German chemist, Harald Kautz-Vella. And he is being, I think, unfairly maligned and discounted because he has some pretty far-out theories. But we are living in a space age now. It's very clear to me, and hopefully I will point out in this hour how that will play on us, because we are subject to the space fence and the space era that the space fence is all about. And part of that is what Harold goes into, of looking again at our biology, the biology of the planet, the biology of the human being and all living creatures, and trying to see how they are electrically connected. And this is what is being right now manipulated, is our electrical, our magnetic relationship with our Earth and with our own bodies.
Right.
So that's where I want to go eventually. But I hope I've pointed out that there are 3 books in the series. Hopefully by the time I finish this third one, I will have said as much as I can, and hopefully people with even more skill and more knowledge than I will come forward and write as well. So let's look at 5G just for a moment. I'm looking out my window here where I live, and I see a small transformer on a telephone pole. Now that this one looks like a sort of black covered electrical entity of some sort with a ganglia of wire hanging from it. And this is where I know that it's not a 5G antenna, but 5G antennas, at least in the States, are going to, for the most part, look like small black boxes, is the word on the street at this point. Now, whether that's true or not, we will have to see over time. We're also told that the 5G rollout is slowly happening. I think one of the cities here is Cincinnati. But the truth is that the 5G rollout is going at an amazing pace right now. It's not future tense. The use of future tense in media is laughable for me, because they constantly use the future tense. NASA uses the future tense.
Right.
Any revelation for the public is used of, well, we're not quite there yet, but we will be. But my guess is that it's been up and running for at least 10 years, in the sense of 5G, at least 10 years, because this is not simply the next increment beyond 4G and 3G. This is a creature of a whole other signature, electrical signature. This is millimeter waves, and that's the important part. Millimeter waves are very, very, very tiny. We have not had millimeter wave technology other than when you are going through at an airport. The TSA is a millimeter wave technology, and as we now know, it is really very damaging to the mitochondria of the DNA. And so having the 5G in neighborhoods, as the Tom Wheeler, head of the FCC, put so succinctly in his absolutely gobsmacking talk. I love that British phrase, gobsmacking. Right. His gobsmacking talk, in which he basically, in a very stentorian military way, told us that we were going ahead with 5G, that nothing was going to stop it, that the profits were going to roll, and we were going to have speed beyond belief, and everybody wants speed in their internet connectivity, blah, blah, blah. He made it clear that the 5G is to serve the Internet of Things, the IoT. And it's important to understand the IoT because most people's homes have it. They have cars that have multiple computers, cars that have multiple sensors in them. Even the freezer or the refrigerator in the kitchen has the sensors and microprocessors. Microprocessors are tiny, tiny computers. We're talking nanoscale now. We're talking nanotechnology, which very few people understand is extremely dangerous in itself. It was released, to the best of my knowledge, I have a whole chapter on nanotechnology in the upcoming book, released big time in 2002 into the public. Whether that is true or not, I don't know, but it's the best that I could come up with. Right. And there was no congressional decision, there was no debate, there was no conference at which the pros and cons were discussed. It simply was done. And what that means is the nanotechnology, we have it in women's cosmetics, we have it in clothing, we have it in foods, we have it in every way possible, already released into the environment. And what they are is really, I don't have national security clearance, so I can't exactly say what they are, but I know that trillions of sensors have been released on the seas, above the U.S. Navy operations, almost anywhere where there is a conglomerate of chemical trails that are turning into a plasma cloud cover, you can expect that there are going to be nanosensors in that cloud, and you're going to see nanoprocessors, microprocessors, which mean two-way communication. They're transceivers, they transmit, they receive, because all that sensor data is being collected and collated and interpreted by supercomputers at the very least, and by quantum computers like D-Wave at the very most. So what is the purpose of all this? Well, it sounds silly to the common person who simply wants to have a good life and have their children have a good life and avoid disease and make a living so that they don't have to worry about money. But to the military mind, what this is about is full spectrum dominance. And I use the title in the first book, in the title, because this is a doctrine, and it is the doctrine that runs the military now, and this has been since the 1990s when we had a full-scale revolution in military affairs. It's known as the RMA. And during that time, we moved from conventional warfare to tactical warfare. We moved from symmetric warfare to asymmetric warfare. We moved from big armies, like in World War II in the fields of France, to tactical special forces teams, most of whom are at least wearing helmets that are triggering their brains and that they are actually in a voice-to-skull technology, or they have been genetically altered themselves. I know that sounds far-fetched, but I think that cloning and genetic alteration of human beings has been going on now for at least 20 to 30 years. So basically the military wants to dominate this whole realm. It wants to dominate the near-Earth orbit. And when I say the military, yes, I'm talking the United States, but I'm also talking NATO countries. I'm also talking agreements and alignments with China, Russia, maybe even North Korea. I don't know. I don't really worry about North Korea. That's sort of a distraction and a pumping up the national fear and justifying military action. But all of this, we are entering a space age. So globalization, which we heard about forever, used to be called internationalism. It's been called globalization for a long time. We're now beginning to see what it means. It means less national rights, less individuality. The Bill of Rights is almost just a historical document now. So globalization really means the space age. And think about it. If you're in charge of setting up a space age, one of the first things Trump did when he came into office was to resurrect the National Space Council, which had been put to bed a few decades ago, along with the Star Wars defense program. Wow. Now he's resurrected it because now we're in the space age. And they're announcing it. They're going public with it. It happened in January. It began in January. They began normalizing the geoengineering we've been subjected to now for 2 decades, as Clifford Carnicom's many papers at his site, carnicominstitute.org, will prove, because he was there. He was operating on a shoestring budget. He was begging the CDC and EPA to duplicate his work in true scientific technique to prove the validity of what he was finding, and they absolutely ignored him, while 186 alphabet organizations were visiting his site daily in order to see what he had come up with. So it's a national security thrust into the space age. It's not the one Kennedy wanted to do when he was attempting to agree with Russia, with the Soviet Union then, that we would go together, we would do a space exploration together, which is another reason that his assassination probably occurred. Because, of course, the bear, the Soviet Union bear, was our enemy, right? Well, I won't go into that, but there was no Cold War. It was a tacit agreement in order to take Americans' money to develop the programs we're seeing now being rolled out. Wow. So full spectrum dominance goes right into the neighborhood, goes right into the human body, goes right into the DNA. So let's look at 5G along those lines. Already we know that the millimeter waves are deadly. Right. I mean, deadly for the mitochondria, the protective layer of the DNA. We already experienced that. I mean, I try never to walk through those terrible TSA gates. Right. I don't care if they molest me while they're patting me down. Go for it, because I don't want that X-ray machine looking through my body. And even though I'm beyond childbearing age, I don't want it in me at all. Because now, and this is the really, really important point. I'm sorry, I'm such a bearer of bad news. No wonder I have no friends left.
You and me both.
It is that it isn't just the 5G penetrating my DNA, mitochondria. It's that what's falling from the chemical trails is not just loaded with, I've already mentioned the microprocessors, I've mentioned the sensors. We all know that there are heavy metals coming, and they're nanoscale, again, nanotech. Right. And those would be aluminum, barium, strontium, lithium, titanium, any EMs that are conductive, any metals that are conductive, and they have to decide on how cheap it is and how much they're going to spend. It isn't just them. Okay, so we have 3 things. Now let's go to the biologicals, the so-called the genetic aberrations, I'll call them, like the Morgellons, like the cross-domain bacteria. Coming into our body, we breathe them. They go into our lungs. They then go out into our bloodstream. They then find their way to the blood-brain barrier, and they're through because they're nanoscale. They're submicron level size. So now we have what are known now as many names, nanobots. Nanobots, they're little robots. We have MEMS in us, GEMS. These are just acronyms for, I think it's electrical sensors. They're extremely tiny. They're all through space. They're in the upper atmosphere. They're in our oceans. They're in every creature that lives in the oceans. They're in us. It's the nanoscale that's done this. If they had been a bit bigger, maybe we wouldn't be so concerned, or I wouldn't be so concerned. But they are very tiny, and they have access to all of our soft tissue organs. Wow. Babies are being born, and in the placenta are the nanobots. So now they have nanobots in us, just from the chemical trails. I haven't even gone into the vaccines and the GMO foods, which are all in league with this operation. Right. The operation's purpose is that they want full spectrum dominance over us too. It isn't just enough to dominate the environment, which of course has to be dominated if you're running a space age, because you have to own and manage your planet if you're planning to go and colonize Mars or even communicate with Saturn or whatever out there in our solar system, which I believe, and I may be the only one, but I believe is their next phase, is they want domination of the solar system as well. It's sort of like that wonderful The Emperor Has No Clothes story by Hans Christian Andersen, isn't it?
Right, right.
It isn't enough to just have this, but you've got to have this, and you've got to have this, and there's another story, The Fisherman and His Wife. I used to tell it when I was a Waldorf teacher. She wants this. No, well, that's not quite enough. Now she wants this, and that's the way this is. Right. There is no limit to full spectrum dominance.
Now,
Once you realize... Oh, go ahead.
I just have a quick question, because I have questions coming in, and I can see them coming in. And one person was asking, how do they protect themselves from all of that? Can they?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Just as it was with AIDS, I cut my teeth on a variety of topics before I ever hit the chemtrails and HARP topics. Right. And I followed the AIDS outbreak in the 80s very deeply and attended meetings of, like one organization I remember was HEAL, H-E-A-L, at which what were they? They were biologists, but they were microbiologists who spoke. And not only did they show me proof that the World Health Organization had been primary in setting up the AIDS epidemic, along with two physicians who were primary in the movement, but they also showed me that the people who created this AIDS epidemic had the antidote. They always have the antidote. Mm-hmm. The Nazis were the same way. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't release, it would be foolish to release something that you did not have the antidote for. And so the antidote here might be a vaccination. We ourselves who are out here suffering from Morgellons and lung problems, and and our health is deteriorating. We have all these autoimmune system conditions. We ourselves are having to look for our own antidotes, and we're all sharing information. It's a very democratic movement. That once you wake up to what's going on planetarily, you enter into a very democratic movement through the internet at this point, because we're all spread all over the globe. This is a global situation. Right. And we try this out, and we try that out, and we don't have access to those vaccinations or those pills or even the HEPA filters that they must have on their houses. They must have extraordinary filters. The HEPA filter was what Clifford Carnicom used when he was collecting the fibers that turned out to be these cross-domain bacteria. So yes, they take care of their own. No worries about that. And I think it might even be the primary perk to becoming an insider is that you get access to this. You will be taken care of in this global slow boiling frog pandemic, because that's what this is. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Clifford and other researchers have not collected the blood and urine and saliva of all people on Earth, but all the ones that have had their blood, saliva, even sweat collected indicate the cross-domain bacteria in them. It's just that in some people they become extremely active. And for years, since I've been in this movement 5 years, by the way, I have observed, and I've certainly emailed and messaged with people who are suffering severely, and from Morgellons, and I would say that the immune system, the status of the immune system seems to be primary. Right. One of the problems with the Morgellons is that it does not recognize, the immune system does not recognize it, and so doesn't act against it. So we're having to come in the back door on treatment, and that's very important, because you realize that Wi-Fi plays a tremendous role in this. The Morgellons, for those who don't know, becomes very active in people who have those terrible boils and suppurations, and see the little red, I think they're red, blue, and black wires that come out. They're very tiny, tiny wires, probably on a micron level, and you come near a toaster oven or your cell phone, and they go nuts. I mean, they go nuts.
Wow.
And
I've seen that on film. I've never experienced it, but I've seen it on film. And I just recently watched a few different talks from Harold that you mentioned, Harald Kautzweiler, and it was really extraordinary. And I hope to have him on in the future as well, because I think he could shed a lot of light on that issue.
Well, he is the only one. And see, Clifford would do what Harold is attempting to do. Harold's concentrating on the optical nature of this assault we are under now. But Clifford is a very thorough, painstaking, conventional scientist. Harold is not, is a little more risk-taking. Right. And Clifford does not have the extremely expensive equipment, such as an electrospectroscope. Mm-hmm. I think he told me this summer when I was up there, it's $50,000 a pop, even a used one. Yeah. So this is how they're also controlling the research end of the scientists who are awakening and who are willing to risk their careers, their families, whatever, in order to find the truth, is that the equipment is so expensive that they're incapable of going to the nano level that they would need to go to really get to the bottom of this. Clifford has isolated the DNA of the cross-domain bacteria. And that's a great feat. That took him years, given that he didn't have the equipment that, of course, NASA, NOAA, CDC, EPA have. So just get a feel for this, that we have these entities in us now that are highly sensitive to Wi-Fi. We're all surrounded by Wi-Fi. I personally do not own a cell phone. I don't really want anyone to know where I am 24/7, or not the bad guys, just anybody. Right. And I don't want to have to deal with what I would have to do to protect myself. I wear a diode, which is basically electrodes kind of going like this. Mm-hmm. All it does is, as I walk through Wi-Fi fields, which my town is completely saturated in it, then it kind of breaks the field, and so that my soft tissue organs might not suffer as much as if I didn't wear the diode. I have found a company that I trust, because there are a lot of placebos out there that probably don't do anything except convince your mind for a while. So now think of the 5G coming into the neighborhood, and you're getting a picture of what its job will be. Yes, it is the Internet of Things. It is concerned with, just as the smart meter is, it is concerned with collecting data from refrigerators, televisions, dishwashers, all the gewgaws in people's houses that they somehow can't do without, and their cell phones, needless to say, are number one, and their iPads and all that stuff, which I don't have. This is the only electromagnetic object that I own, and I do that because I write, and I need it. And at night, if I could, I'm renting right now, and if I could turn the router off at night, I would, but that I'm, not really allowed to do that. So instead, I just power down everything around me, make sure my head is to the north, hopefully close to the magnetic north, and I sleep fine. I sleep fine at this point. Right. But I don't have a 5G outside my house yet. Yeah. I'm sure it will come. I live, and when I decided to rent in this place, I've only been in it a while. You can tell by how I don't have many books in my bookcase yet, because my books are still at the old place. Right. I checked all the houses. I checked the telephone poles, where the cell towers were, what was outside, because I've taught myself all of this so that I can protect myself, so I can finish my task here on the earth. Hopefully, I've chosen wisely. And I actually had an email the other day from a woman who had been told that someone who knew something about these things came out and told her that she needed to move immediately, because there was no way that she could ameliorate her situation given the technology around her, and she says, I can't move. Well, I don't believe in can't. I'm sure there's a way that people can move, but if you are thinking of moving soon, anybody, then please check the neighborhood out, because the 5G is on its way. So
now, do you think there is a space more in the country that is safer than in the cities? Do you think that makes a difference in regards to where 5G will be, or do you think it'll be everywhere?
They're promising it'll be everywhere. Oh, they want to bring Africa in on this.
Wow.
I mean, full spectrum dominance means full spectrum dominance. We are Internet of Things. Our bodies, our brain, to them. Right. We are not separate. All of life is involved in this. That will be trees, animals, bugs. I mean, I'm seeing every day how insects are just disappearing. Yeah, they're just disappearing around there. So the Wi-Fi ramping up, and we were sold a bill of goods. Americans are easy to control if you can convince them that they're going to have more convenience and they're going to have more comfort. Right. This is how they get Americans. Right. And this entitlement, this mentality of entitlement, I have no use for it. Right. I am ruthless with people who feel entitled. I've been living on the edge since the 60s, because in the 60s, when John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy were assassinated in public and nothing happened. Nothing. Yeah. I knew I was on my own. Yeah. And so I have always tried to live on the edge so that I can stay awake, and so that I'm not subject to some corporation. Probably my worst sin is that I worked for public education for a while as a
but
teacher.
You did work for a Waldorf school, so that
I worked for Waldorf, which was a good thing. Yes, that was 16 years of my life. So you wanted to talk about 5G. That's about as far as I can go. Right. Millimeter waves, Internet of Things. We are in the Internet of Things. We have nanobots in us. Those 5G will be keeping track of those nanobots. If they need to zap me individually, or zap my neighborhood, or zap my community with a pulse, a frequency that will turn my community, like I think happened in Ferguson, Missouri, a few years ago with when the black boy was shot, the community overnight turned violent. That can happen. The 5G will be the sort of metronome bum, 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 by which they can do that in any place, any time, to anyone.
So
And
you think they can
that's the
actually
purpose.
change our feelings, our
Emotions?
emotions, our how
Oh,
whether
easily.
we feel angry or sad or happy. They can.
Easily.
Wow.
And what you would need to research in order to know the truth of that. I spent 10 years on MK Ultra, and I know, oh, I don't know, a dozen victims of MK Ultra, some of whom are better and have done a great deal of deprogramming work, others of whom are still programmed but think they aren't. So if you study MK Ultra, you realize that back in the days of, I'd say 1973, since 1973 at least, all the frequencies of all the illnesses that we are prone to or have been for centuries, millennia, uh, each illness has its own frequency. Each emotion has its frequency. Each thought can be, because it is frequency. When you think, as you will notice, rarely can you think a thought without words. Some people I've noticed, though, when I've asked high school classes, which is what I taught when I was teaching in public ed, I've asked them, when I tell a story to you, how many of you see pictures? And
Wow.
very few see pictures. How many of you just follow the words and have experiences from my words? And most of the class will raise its
Really?
hand. So that's okay. You hear the words. Well, that still includes the right brain, which is interpreting the words and drawing meaning from it. But the fact that very few are seeing pictures is a real indication, not just of the right brain, I've realized, but also of the status of the pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
And the pineal gland is that which produces the melatonin by which we can sleep at night.
Right.
So the next survey I should have done while I was teaching was, were these kids raised with fluoride water? If they were, then their pineal gland is probably not functioning maximally, and therefore they are incapable of really penetrating these things. So I'm thinking that with the 5G, completely as the sort of maestro over the Internet of Things in neighborhoods, will be reading us and anything they want to know about us. I mean, my computer is going to tell them a lot because my computer is part of the Internet of Things.
Right.
So yes, everything has its frequency: sadness, anger,
Wow.
indignation. The one I think of is in my town, complacency.
Wow.
Complacency.
Yes. That is all over the place, too much.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to say something from my experience about sleeping. I have made it a habit to flip the breaker in my house, to turn everything off, literally all electricity coming into my cabin. And if I can't do that for some reason, because I need to charge something or whatever, I would definitely flip off the Wi-Fi. So I turn that's on a separate strip. I turn the router, I turn everything off, including the antenna thing outside. Everything goes off. And my dreams are incredibly vivid again. I wasn't aware how little I had been dreaming till I started doing that. My dreams are vivid. I can remember them in the morning. I mean, it's like a whole switch got turned off in my head as well. And I wasn't aware how much that had changed until I started doing that.
Oh, I recommend that for everyone.
Yeah.
It's so great that you can do that because it's your cabin. You can flip the switch, and that's pineal gland territory, dreams. So I really recommend to people that before you get to be aware of what's going on in your neighborhood, where the telephone guys are, where the white vans with no markings on them are, who's getting out, who's doing what, who's up the poles. Really follow it, and then to go out and talk to these guys. They're just the workmen, and they're going to suffer because they're up on these poles. I mean, one of the most important people who was an advisor for me, and I've had several throughout the Space Fence book, was Billy Hayes, known as the Harp Man. Billy is a little younger than me, not much, and he has worked his entire life for a three-letter agency through its defense contractors, and his job has been to erect the towers like HARP, like all of the ionospheric heaters, like all of the radar installations. He's worked on 240 of those, crawled up there, calibrated them, and now his body is loaded with tumors. And every time they shift the frequency of one of those sites that he worked on, or that is calibrated to the same calibration he became accustomed to, he has seizures.
Oh my God!
And they're hundreds, thousands of miles away. Wow. That's what I'm talking about. That's an ionized atmosphere. Right. Everything is moving through the atmosphere. It's invisible. You can't see it. And that's why people are afraid, and why I guess they're waiting for the authority figures to have the courage to come forward and tell us what's going on. That's not going to happen. I don't even get excited when whistleblowers come, because if they worked for the CIA or the NASA or the EPA or whatever, I assume they're still on the payroll in some way. And they're going to give us half-truth mixed with some cover-up. So I've been on my own. And that's why I've discovered so much. I've just plowed through thousands of documents, patents, papers, looking to see where the patterns are and how this works, how this, going back into science, back into physics that I remember hating when I was in high school. And now I'm like, oh, this is fantastic, because all of this knowledge is teaching me where I live and when I live in a real way. I mean, why else are we born? We're not born to just have our little smug lives where we're all safe and tidy and have plenty of money, or everybody's, well, what about all the other people? What about everybody else? Right. And that has always burdened me since I was a child, is that humanity itself is evolving. And there are parties now very active in science and technology who do not want us to evolve. Right. They want a slave class. Yeah. And they are determined to have the slave class because this is how they see they will be able to go forward into the solar system and continue their pursuit of full spectrum dominance. And I am opposed to these, if they still are people. I am very opposed to them. And so I think all of us need to just take a hand in this, not, oh, Elana said this, Elana said that. No, that's not good enough. I can break some ground, but I can't break all the ground because I'm not trained. And truthfully, even if I wanted to go and get a PhD, I wouldn't know where to go where I could study this, because this is national security stuff. Yeah. Yeah, only the in-crowd. I think only the Jason group has access to this, is my theory. And you probably never heard of the Jason group, but you should research it. Very, very elite science brotherhood. So here we are in our era. Right. Very exciting for people like me who are basically warriors for truth and for goodness. Yes. I couldn't have asked for anything more, actually. Right.
I always say I feel privileged to be alive at this time and be part of at least spreading the truth, Even if I'm not that much of a truth finder, I'm privileged to have people like you on and other people who do dig deeply and have them on and spread the truth about it. I feel truly privileged in that.
Oh, you are the conduit. I mean, I could sit here. I mean, how many people read? Not many.
Not as many as should.
Actually, I'm writing these books I mean, I'm thrilled that people like you read, but most people don't. And I actually am writing these books for 50 years down the road when they're going to ask, what the hell happened?
Right, right.
And wasn't anyone awake to this?
Right. And the other thing, Elana, that I find so wonderful about books, an actual book in my hand, is that it cannot be changed like an online book. You have a book in your hand. That is what the author wrote. It's not like, and this again is Elana's book, Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. That one is already out. 2 other ones are not yet out. But I highly recommend getting a copy because it is the kind of thing, if you have the hard copy, it cannot be changed. And those are the words of the author. And not just, online. I mean, how quickly can a book be changed online? It takes no effort whatsoever.
That's exactly right. And that will be happening more and more now that, fake news is being defined.
Exactly.
And it, electronic word, it's a wonderful tool. I think of the internet and the Facebook as being the modern town square. I would prefer a town square that were more real with people. Like when I was living in New Mexico, there was the plaza you could go, and there were men there playing checkers and chess and having conversations, and people sleeping on park benches getting a quick nap. But that's a local life. Right. We're now being forced, whether we want to or not, to live a global life.
Right.
So if we're living a global life, we will use this electronic tool of communication, even though we're all going on watch lists and, we're all being eavesdropped and recorded and whatever. Right. We will use this tool as long as it lasts.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we will have to find something else. And, I'm also thrilled to be in the company of people who are going off grid and who are farming.
Which I'm heavily working on. Yes, I mean, I'm like back to the, like I'm a real Vermont hippie. Growing food, firewood, wood stove. I mean, the whole works. Composting toilet. I mean, the whole works. I'm really working on a completely self-sustaining life. And if the power goes out, I can still live a good life.
That's fantastic.
Less light in the winter, but that's okay. I'll sleep more. That's fine. Now, besides living a life off grid in the boonies, is there anything that people can do to protect themselves, to make a difference for them personally if they feel affected? Is there anything that you would suggest?
Oh, yes. And that would be the first thing that comes to mind. And it definitely works. I did it. I subjected Clifford to my experiments, and it worked for him too. Is the alkaline acid paradigm. The Morgellons creature, this cross-domain bacteria, not only loves Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi and the cross-domain bacteria love acidity. So if people, your listeners, insist on living in a Wi-Fi environment, they'd better watch their alkalinity, and they can go out and buy some pH paper at the drugstore, pee on it in the morning to see where they're at, make decisions, do some research to find out what produces acidity, what produces alkaline. People will be surprised by some of because the production, say there's something acid out here, such as, could I use coffee? Anyway, some things are acid out here, and in the body, during oxidation, they turn into their opposite. So they're going to have to be a bit subtle. Yeah. Yes, like that. I remember in the 60s, we used to swear by cayenne and some terrible drink that we did whenever we got sick, and then we get better. So, it's a wonderful experimental phase to find how you can keep your body alkaline and not acidic. And I don't mean no acidity. I mean a certain ratio.
Right.
That will serve health. As all doctors know, illness and death prefer acidity, and so does the Morgellons creature, and Wi-Fi produces acidity.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, and so the people who insist on the cell phone thing, they should be using their microphone, they should be using something like that, those earbuds,
right.
And keep it far from the body if you insist on using it. But at night, such as you do, to just power down everything, especially routers.
Right.
Even though your neighbors won't, if you're living in a neighborhood, their waves will be going through your house, and you will still be subject to waves.
Right.
But they will be far less than routers. And think of your children in schools where the routers, go and take a good look at those routers, and you will see why. I mean, in Europe, as I recall, especially Northern Europe, I think, they are banning all computers from classrooms. Right. And libraries and city halls and everything municipal, because they know now that this spells brain cancer or cancer in general.
Right. It hurts my heart, Elana, when I see little kids, and I mean 2-year-olds, with a tablet, you know, playing games. I'm just in shock. I'm literally in shock when I see that.
It is.
It is painful to watch. It's like handing a child a pack of cigarettes. I mean, what are you doing, people? You know,
it's worse than cigarettes.
Yeah, it's worse than cigarettes. I mean, it's so hard to watch. And I want to say real quick, because I can see that we keep breaking up, which isn't surprising having you on. I will also upload it on YouTube for the people who are watching, and I will have it uploaded there so you can watch it in its entirety without breaking up all the time, and also on BitChute so you guys can see it there as well. And I just wanted to interject that because it's constantly breaking up here, but we have a lot of people wanting to have that information, so I'm really grateful that you're here.
Yeah, and I think that people need to re-examine their lifestyle. We get very attached to comfort and convenience and entitlement in America. That's how they've, it worked better than the hammer and sickle in the Soviet Union. And now the Soviet Union, being Russia again, is going in a similar direction, post-industrial direction. But when you look at your lifestyle, it's like... I live extremely simply because I have this obsession. First of all, writing is central. It's key, and so everything else has to be at a certain ratio of quantity. I can't be distracted by taking care of a lot of stuff around me. Right. So I have a car, I have a computer. And then from there, everything is negotiable. Right. Of course, I need food, but I eat organic only. Yeah. I cook. I eat out as seldom as possible. Yeah. If I need to finally see a human face, an actual human face, not an electronic human face, I may go out and have a glass of wine at my favorite watering hole. Always only one glass. And so I'm rather stentorian about my habits because I know what my job here is. Right. And I think by the time you're post 45, maybe in America things are pretty slow here, so post 50, you have to come to terms with what your job is. And if your job is too narrow, such as my job is, making Thanksgiving dinner for my family when they come. Right. That's too narrow. You have to give something to the world that has succored you, and that will be passed on to the younger generations. You have to. And what that is entirely up to you. Don't need to do what I'm doing, but you must do something. Right. Or a life can be really short-changed. I hate to use that money term, but
no, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And when I moved to Vermont 14 years ago, I needed to lick my wounds for a while But I was very clear that a life of leisure was not going to be my life. And also because I never wanted to have children of my own, although I love kids and kids love me. But I was very clear that I wouldn't have kids. I feel very much that my life is here to be of service. And that's how I try to live my life, in a small way and in as big a way as I can do. And I feel by having this online channel, that's one of my contributions. And I think we all have to find our voice in one way or another, whether that's by writing, whether it's talking to the neighbors, or in whichever way somebody can find their voice and spread truth, all truth, individually, personal truth as well as global truth. We need to do that, and we need to be committed to that. I think that's where it all really stands and falls, how whether there will be life on Earth and what kind of life there will be on Earth. And so I am so grateful that you are a truth teller and that you took the time to come on. And I think we have just about our hour full. But if you have anything else that you really would like to convey, please don't hesitate.
Well, I want people to know that I have a wonderful lady in Florida who's making a website for me for free.
Nice. Oh,
very
nice.
Nice of her.
Nice.
And that is at elanafreeland.com, all lowercase. And there is an email address there that I do check, and we're still working on it, still fine tuning it. But I'm really happy that she's doing this, because I just need somewhere to put my stuff.
Right. I mean, you need an online closet. Exactly.
Online closet that I will be blogging eventually. But also, if you're a Facebook person, you can ask to be a member of my closed Facebook sites. I have one, which is the Elana Freeland Chemtrails, HAARP, and Full Spectrum. And that one is really good for science and all the things that connect to this issue that we have been talking about today. Right. And then the other one is Elana Freeland Sub Rosa America. We didn't get to that today, Claudia, but that's all right. The Sub Rosa America series is a series I wrote, a fictional history series of America since Kennedy's assassination, right. Because I had tea with Kennedy in the Rose Garden when I was 15, and wow. It was a huge experience for me. Right. And when he and Martin and Robert were all killed, I have never forgotten. And so I wrote these novels about that, and that's what the Elana Freeland Sub Rosa America site is, and again, a closed site, right. About everything that doesn't have to do with what's happening geophysically, but has to do with psychological, MK Ultra, all sorts of things that are shadow government, or as we call it now, the deep state. Right. So feel free to ask for membership. I go to your site, see what kind of consciousness you have, and decide whether you really belong at that site or not. So sometimes I'm ruthless. Right. I apologize in advance.
And I will also put those links in the description of the video, so you guys have that as well and can click on it and join. So I will definitely put that on there. So thank you again. And I do want to put that book up one more time, Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, because that one is already available. Unlike the other two, we have to be a little bit more patient. But Elana, thank you so very much for coming on. And I certainly hope you will be back again, and that was not our last interview. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, Claudia.